Hi, friends. My name is Vanessa Fernandez, and I run the Enneagram workshop where we do deep Enneagram work. And I run an Instagram account where I love to post content. And every so often, I'll post an Instagram series that I feel like there's more to be said. I want to say more. There's deeper places that I'd like to go. There's only so much that can fit in those little squares, and I just want to talk about it some more. So today we're going to talk about a series I just did on inner work and our defense mechanisms and how those defense mechanisms may show up for each Enneagram type. There's some questions that I would love for you to consider depending on your type. And before we get into that, I do want to speak about the defense mechanisms themselves. I want to speak about what we're doing as we're working with those defense mechanisms. Because really, when we're talking about the defense mechanism of each type, we're talking about the ways that each type tries to create and sustain a narrative around their idealized self. So for example, if the type 1's idealized self is a type that never makes mistakes or does anything that is wrong, then the defense mechanism is going to come in and try and continue to agree with and support that narrative, that idealized self. Now, for all of the types, the idealized self is not actually humanly possible. It's not something that gives us room for all of our humanity. And so a lot of times our defense mechanisms are coming in and trying to either resist, reject, push away, keep hidden in the shadows, the parts of our humanity that don't agree with who we think we have to be in order to be safe, to be seen, to belong, and to feel like we matter. So we're really talking about shadow work when we're talking about our defense mechanisms. We're really talking about these ways that we self-deceive and how that may make us feel better in the short term because we can agree with who we think we have to be and it feels good. It's like, yes, this is the story I've always told myself. This confirms that story. I can just keep going along my life that way. However, it's not truth. It's, as I said, a way of self-deception. And as we push against parts of our humanity, you may or may not have already experienced this. I know I have. The more I try to resist, push away, reject parts of myself, over time, they become louder. Over time, they ask and demand my attention with more intensity. And so a lot of times when we find ourselves either lashing out in ways that we never have before, when we find ourselves falling into despair and depression as we never have before, when we find our bodies experiencing some deep chronic pain that we've never experienced before, it may be an indicator that some of these parts of our humanity, some of this shadow side of ourselves is demanding to be seen, is begging for us to relax our defense mechanisms and invite them into the light and turn toward those parts of ourselves that we have historically tried to not be present to because it threatens who we think we have to be, again, in order to be safe, to be seen, etc. Okay, so we are talking a bit about ego, but we're not talking about getting rid of ego. We're just talking about the ways that ego doesn't like to change. It holds on to the status quo. It doesn't like to transform. And yet the essential nature of our souls, of ourselves, is one that is dynamic, that is in constant flow and flux and transformation and change. So when ego is so rigid and has such a control over how we express ourselves, what we allow within ourselves, we are going to find this tension between the ego that wants to hold on and stay the same and the soul that knows it is meant to, and because it is healthy and alive, always be changing, transforming, growing, adjusting, expanding, whatever the case may be. Okay. All right. So let's start with type 1. Type 1's defense mechanism is called reaction formation or reaction control. And it is that almost like a little gate that takes every emotion and runs it through the judgment of what that individual perceives to be the right way or the wrong way to either feel or express their feelings. And if any emotion that is arising conflicts with what that person believes to be the right way, it will be stuffed down, stifled, and pushed away, right? So anything coming up hits that security guard gate and is either allowed to pass or not allowed to pass. And typically that gate, you'll feel it right here around the neck, around the jaw. Type 1s may tend to have some tension somatically in this area because this is the space where everything kind of constricts before it is expressed. And so some questions, knowing that that is the defense mechanism for type 1, some questions that I'm curious about if you are a type 1 and you are starting to do inner work and your ego is starting to realize that there's transformation up ahead and maybe it's like, and engaging in its defense mechanism. A question I'd love for you to ask yourself is, what are you really feeling about this inner work? Right? Maybe you're reading a book, maybe you've attended a seminar, maybe you've just had a really good conversation with your therapist or a friend, and inner work seems to be inviting you to come deeper. What are you really feeling about that inner work? What are you really feeling about that invitation? It's okay to acknowledge that even though you know, oh, I really should be doing that work, or I really should be showing these signs of non-judgment or non-dual thinking or whatever it is that you're reading about. But I don't want to, or I don't like it, or I'm noticing rigidity, or I'm not sure that I agree with that, right? Noticing that little rebel within you, that little part of you that says, I don't know how I feel about this, or I don't know that I feel the right way that I should or that I'd want to feel about this. Can you be with yourself in truth? And can you be present to what you're really feeling about this inner work? And what is that? What is true? The next question I would love to ask you is, once you've identified what your true feelings are you letting those feelings be present? And how could you let those feelings be present in a way that is still respectful of others, that is still aligned with your internal values of not causing harm, of not being a bad person? Is there a space where you can express what you are truly feeling without it violating your need to be someone who does good and who is kind or pleasant or what have you, right? Because sometimes we can connect. If I am my true authentic self, I will hurt people. If I express what I really feel, that's going to cause harm. Maybe, but would there maybe be a center space where you get to express how you really feel, even if it's just to yourself, so that that truth is acknowledged, so that you are being with it, and you are even confronting your internal need to see yourself as a good person, and you're realizing, oh shit, sometimes I'm not a good person. Sometimes I'm really judgmental. Sometimes I'm really angry. Sometimes I hold really firmly to my rigid beliefs that this is not okay. And I want to say things that are maybe mean. Could there be a safe space where no one gets hurt, but you get to be in truth and fully human? What creative environments, people, spaces could you find so that it doesn't have to be either reaction formation, that's not acceptable, it doesn't get to be here, or I'm just going to let them have it and just be a total, bleh. What would it look like for you to honor who you actually are, what you actually feel, and your values of not causing harm? And then finally, what experiences are you resisting or not allowing yourself to be with? Are there any things that you want to say, do, experience? Could be on the high side, excitement, joy. Could be on the low side, sorrow, grief. I actually find with ones, there can be a lot of really high excitement, desire, longing, imagining a future that gets cut off. What experiences are you not allowing yourself to even approach? What experiences or feelings are you resisting, not allowing? Those are my questions. Those are my questions for type 1. I'm going to have a separate video for each type. So if you want to keep hearing about what we're talking about, I invite you to check out the rest of the videos in this series. And if you are interested in learning about how these defense mechanisms show up, especially in 2 different arenas, these are my specialties and expertise that I tend to work in. First, if you are either a therapist or a coach, as you are doing work with others, it is inevitably going to stir up, bring up, and reveal any areas where you are not also doing your own inner work. It is going to color, your defense mechanism is going to seep in and color how you do work with others. There may be ways that you try to engage in reaction formation, for example, with your clients. And so exploring what that looks like in a coach-therapist-client relationship is something that I love to mentor and guide other coaches through. And then also in the corporate space, I work especially with corporate teams that have a very diverse and a lot of variety in the different Enneagram types that are present within that team. And we look at how, when the defense mechanisms show up, how they show up, and how those defense mechanisms may interact well or may interact poorly with the others within that team. And then finally, what are some nervous system regulation tools that we can engage in as a team to help the defense mechanisms relax, so that we have more openness, collaboration, and ability to truly trust, build trust, because we have to build trust with ourselves first before we can build trust with others. And this is where the defense mechanism, yes, we are defending against how we appear to others, but we're actually defending against how we appear to ourselves because we don't trust ourselves, right? Type 1s only need to do reaction formation when they don't trust that whatever is coming up, they will be able to navigate and handle and channel and deal with. So looking at the defense mechanisms, how they show up in corporate teams, how we build trust with ourselves, and how that trickles out into building trust within the collective. And how do we work with those defense mechanisms so they don't become all of these walls and partitions, keeping us from doing good work together in the corporate spaces. So if either of those sound interesting to you, my information is in the notes of this video, and I would love to chat more about how I might be able to guide, assist, and mentor you through some of these dynamics. All right, head over to the next video for type 2s.